Julie, there's this talk about how the Great Resignation isn't turning out what people thought it would be. A lot of people have said the grass ain't necessarily greener on the other side. And some companies, I'm reading a study that finds a lot of companies are welcoming back their former employees upwards up to a year and a half after they left. What's going on with what they call boomerangers?
Well, first of all, I'm not surprised. When you think about how people make decisions to switch jobs, it has happened so fast in this period that there's bound to be a lot of bad decisions made. People jump a lot of times. I call it jumping dumb. They jump to something else without really thinking about why. Because a lot of us were really pulled in by the dangling carrot of a big salary increase. But salary, it has been proven time and time again, is not the primary reason people are unhappy at their jobs. And so we get stars in our eyes because we're getting, and we feel like the prettiest girl at the party, because everybody wants to hire us. So what happens is we don't ask the right questions. We don't think about what we're looking for next. And another little piece of icing on this cupcake is a lot of those decisions were made via Zoom. And so you never really got to meet people in person. And so you got a really narrow perspective on what working for that company would be like. So in a lot of cases, unfortunately, it was kind of bad decision making. The problem is, I've seen survey after survey, and it says that 90% of people who change jobs then go back to their former employer, leave again within a year because they didn't think about why they were leaving or what was causing them to leave. And then you come back and you're like, oh yeah, I remember what I didn't like about this. And so I think it's in general bad decision-making. So employers, a lot of times in a lot of cases, weren't really that excited to welcome people back, but we're in such a talent shortage that employers are overlooking the fact that you broke up with me once, and now you want to come back again, and they're willing to give people another chance just from a sheer lack of options.
But there's got to be some kind of positive part of bringing back an old employee. They're already trained, right?
You bet. Yes. They know your culture. They know what they're getting into, for better or for worse. They already know the people. They have relationships built up. But from the employer side of the desk, I would say, think hard about, what does this person bring back? In other words, do they bring back more good than bad? Because there are certainly people who leave our organization and we're like, oh, thank heavens, because they really were not a great team player or they were just a mediocre performer. And so what's happening from the employer side is we get to that it's a warm body phenomenon. And so I think before you get back into an employment relationship, let's say you're the employee, really think hard. Is it best to go back, or is it better to sit tight, think really about what is most important to you next in your career, and look for something else? In other words, A and B are not your only options. And so I counsel people to think hard about the good, the bad, the mistakes they've made, what they want more of, and be more thoughtful about your next move, whether that's forward or back.
Are employees also taking a look at what they've just gone through as, hey, if I leave again, it'll be just as easy to find another company?
Yeah, for sure. Without a doubt, people are thinking, it's sort of like, the power, the leverage goes to your head. Back in 2008, everyone hung on to jobs they hated for dear life, because they truly were made to believe there was nothing else out there. Now we go out there and we think, well, if it doesn't work, I'll just go do something else. And that's true to an extent. But you have 3 or 4 short service jobs in a row. It's not as frowned upon as it used to be, but at the same time, people are going to look at that and say, okay, what are the chances you're going to come here and stay? And you take on that, I have bad judgment. I'm making bad decisions. And so you have to, it's not a free for all where you can go up to the buffet and sample 10 things and then find a delicious one on the 11th. Employers will start to look at you askance and say, this person's not really making good judgment. So why would we really want them back? And if you were a mediocre performer at your last company and you realize you've made a terrible mistake, don't expect that they're going to welcome you back with open arms. There has to be some thinking on both sides of the table.
What about the workplace culture? How has that changed since the pandemic to keep employers and keep employees happy?
No, it's funny. It's a spectrum. So on one end, there are employers who are like, they've changed nothing. I'm like, well, and I'm a boomer, so I can say these are generally led by boomers who say, well, things are going to go back to the way they were. This is just a blip. And those people are ignoring all of the data that says otherwise. And so we've had clients that'll go on interviews and they'll say, yeah, well, we don't believe in work-life balance. I had a client who they said to him, this job will be your job, your hobby, your wife, and your friends. He's like, no, thank you. He's a boomer. Then you have the other end where there are companies out there who are trying things, more progressive organizations, especially companies who hire a lot of young people. So think like your big four accounting firms. They are way ahead of the curve and they're trying progressive things. Things like, unlimited time off or, 4-day work weeks, or you pick the hours you work, or retention bonuses. So they're doing all these things to find out what works. They're experimenting. And one of the questions that we tell our clients to ask potential employers is, how has your workplace changed in the last few years? What have you done to adjust to the changes in the last 3 years, in our culture or at work? How has your culture changed? You can learn a lot by asking an open-ended question like that. You'll get anything from, well, here's what we've done. And we've not changed anything. So you want to go work for those organizations who actually have listened to their people and what their people want and have made adjustments based on that, versus we're going to shove you back into a model that doesn't work. So there's a lot of experimentation going on, which is actually good, because the right answer is not the same right answer for every organization.
Are those companies also less likely to promote from within if they're not forward thinking?
Probably, yeah. I think that when you look at the old model, of work, like when I started, in the early 80s, it was very much we're older than you are and we have better titles, so we'll tell you what's right for you. And now the smart companies are saying, tell us what you want. Part of a good retention strategy is ongoing conversation with your people as to what they want and what's most important to them in their career development as they move forward. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to provide everything, but what you get by asking and trying to help people navigate their careers is the mark of a progressive organization. And sadly, there are organizations that are going to fail, are going to not be around because they put their head in the sand and ignored what all the data, all the signs are telling them. And when you look at the makeup of the workforce in any company, it's very interesting, because when you look at the number of Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, boomers, that bar, the percentage of the workforce that is boomers has drastically shrunk because of the unexpected resignation of millions of boomers that hadn't planned to, but COVID shoved them ahead. And so the proportions of the generations in the workforce are changing, and changing very quickly. And so if you don't get with it, you aren't going to have a company.
Anything else you think our listeners should know about the ongoing changes?
If you work in a company that you feel like is not as progressive as you'd like them to be, don't be afraid to go to them and suggest some ideas. In a lot of companies, they think that the top leadership has to have all the answers, and they are hesitant for some reason to engage their people. But the people on the ground, on the floor, doing the work are the people who actually will have your best ideas. And so if you are looking to make some changes in your culture, and because you really like it and you want to stay there, you like so much about it, don't just run. Now try to engage your boss, leadership several levels up if you can, in a conversation, and ask if you can put together an employee team to help move things forward. Because if you like a lot of things about where you're working, try to change it where you are before you jump to something else.